So last week I told you we would be speaking about wisdom. There's a lot of different aspects of wisdom, and the wisdom Shirley wants for her family is not this week. It's not the aspect. We will look at it though. Solomon says to listen to his instruction and be wise, become wise. And that the wise in heart are called discerning. There is no one on this planet, of the 7 billion people here, that have any idea of what's happening in the world today, of all the tumult, with the exception of God's people. We should have a knowledge, we should have a wisdom and the ability to discern what is happening, what are the things going on in this world. And what are we supposed to be doing during this time? I've had a lot of different people in the last year and a half for sure, maybe 2 years, more than any other time, ask me, are we in the last days? Are we in the last times? Is Jesus coming back? You know, everyone seems to be living in fear. Their fear of COVID, their fear of masks, their fear of the shot that they might get, their fear of the national debt is $28 trillion. Is anybody afraid of that number? They're afraid of wars. They're afraid of the things that are going on, the global warming. You know, last month, July, the National Weather Service said in 143 years that they've been taking down temperatures around the United States and eventually around the world. 143 years. Last July was the hottest July on their records. Is that global warming? Does that scare anybody? People live in fear about those kinds of things. Churches are shutting down and pot shops are opening up. I'm not saying I'm for or against the legalization of marijuana and different things. I'm just saying what seems to be lacking is spiritualness. And what seems to be growing is the things of man, what man is building up. Family units have broke down. What is a family unit now today is way different than when I was a kid, by definition. By psychiatrists and sociologists 50, 60 years ago would claim that the definition of a family unit is different today. They've changed their attitude according to the world. September 11th, 2001, we had a terrorist attack, and we were very concerned about our nation, and so we did things, and we put our army and the Marines, we went to different places around the world where terrorist cells were, and one of those places was Afghanistan. So for 20 years we've been in Afghanistan, and we have not been hit for 20 years, correct? We have not had a terrorist attack from the Taliban in that period of time, the last 20 years. And now they have a nation. They have the whole nation of the Afghanistan. They've got their capital. They've got billions of dollars of American equipment, helicopters, Humvees, machine guns, whatever. Some people are afraid of that. Now what's going to happen next, right? Is the world out of control? When you watch the news, do you come back going, boy, what a great day it is to be alive? Or do you go, oh my gosh, it just seems like when things can't get worse, it is. The murder rate has skyrocketed in almost every major city in America. I don't know how it is around the world, but in America, a terrible crime rate is just skyrocketing. And you got a group of people that don't want law enforcement anymore. Just sort of let them have their way. They deserve it because you people have had so much. There's a mentality out there, and it's very confusing to us. Wisdom. We looked at it last week. Wisdom isn't, if you got out of wisdom last week, that Solomon looked at 2 harlots and came up and said, you know what, you get this child. What he did was, the wisdom of God was, that he understood human nature. He could get to the very center, the very kernel of human nature with his dramatization of cutting the child in half. He knew that that would spark, not just for him, but all of his court would know that that woman is the mother and that one is not. It was obvious, okay? He understood that. This wisdom about discerning the times we are living in is something a little different than that. Jesus is my teacher. Jesus, in Matthew chapter 24 and 25, gives us a hint about what kind of days lie ahead and what we are going to be in to understand. And we need wisdom to do that. Starting in chapter 21, Jesus, he's already come to Jerusalem. They thought he was going to be the king, and all these thousands of people, Palm Sunday and all that took place. He cleansed the temple, he left, he's coming back, he curses a fig tree, if you remember that, because there is no fruit on that fig tree. And now he comes into Jerusalem, he's by the temple, and hundreds, probably thousands of people have gathered around to listen to him teach. And the Pharisees are asking him questions. You know, should we give tax unto Caesar? You know that whole thing. All of those things are going on. And now Jesus has, by his wisdom, refuted everything that they had to say. And they couldn't question him anymore. Because of his godly wisdom. There's nothing they could do to combat that. Jesus now is leaving the temple area, heading out the eastern gate to go to the Mount of Olives. And when he went there, most of the other people left. All the Pharisees and those people stayed there. The religious people left behind. But some of his closest followers, the most intimate group, went with Jesus. And this is chapter 24. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to the buildings. Now, the temple building, remember the first temple of Solomon, was very ornate, beautiful, right? It was destroyed. The Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar, destroyed it. Everything was gone. 70 years later, Ezra, Nehemiah, they rebuilt the temple. Wasn't as ornate, pretty plain. 400 years later, now King Herod is actually built up so it looks ornate. So it's something fitting for King Herod to put his name on. And these disciples of Jesus are going, hey, by the way, look at the temple. Look at what man has built. Our relationship with God, isn't it awesome because of the size of our temple? That doesn't make sense to us here and now, but I'm just saying that's what they were trying to tell Jesus. Jesus says, do you see all of these things that man has made? I tell you that not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Now, we're going to look at some prophecy that Jesus speaks about. And that's one of them. And so the thing we don't understand is the when. God does not have a timeline. There's no time in heaven. God's infinite. Always has been, always will be. And when we die and go to heaven, we will be in this infinite time. There will be no end for us. Right? We will be there, but there will be no end. So God has some things happening, and there's an order to the things he does. And when you see a prophecy, we just see it, but we have no idea when it's going to take place. We didn't know when the Christ child was going to be born. We didn't know when Israel would get the land of Canaan. We didn't know some of these things. And Jesus is saying, do you see the temple? Not one stone will be left on another. Now that took place in 70 AD. So that one came true already. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, tell us when this will happen and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age. And that's what we're going to look at today, just for a moment. How do you know what age we are living in? What is the time frame? In God's mind, he sees all from the beginning to the end. The book of Revelation is already written. We can see the beginning and end. We just have no date. So they're wondering what the signs, what will it look like in the world for us today, or at that time. Jesus says, Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming I'm the Messiah, and will deceive many. How are they going to be able to deceive you? You need wisdom to understand what truth is and what false is. A true pastor, evangelist, prophet, apostle, whatever, teacher of God, and a false teacher of God. And Jesus is going to go over this once again. Number 2, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. You don't have to be afraid just because there's wars and battles going throughout the world. Those are all man-made situations. Don't be afraid, church. That is an indication of the end times. Then there's going to be something in nature. He says there are going to be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. There's always been famine. In the days of Abraham, there was a famine, right? And he had to go to Egypt. There's been famines, there's been earthquakes. So far, Jesus hasn't told me too much about the when. He's not really answered too much, right? All of this has taken place forever. And so how about a little bit more, Lord? Give me a little more understanding. This is big. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and to be put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. Now that's a pretty big clue. That Jesus was not talking to those disciples on the Mount of Olives. Because the only people who knew that Jesus was, none of them believed he was the Christ. Not even his apostles, right? That he'd be raised from the dead. But the only people who knew of Jesus, period, were the people who lived in Jerusalem. There wasn't even a nation of Israel at this time. There's only Jerusalem. That whole area was called Palestine. And then when it was destroyed in 70, there wasn't even that. I mean, it's still Palestine, but there was really almost no Jerusalem other than the site. Everything had been destroyed, the temple, the walls, and everything. And so, how does the nation, all the nations of the world are going to hate us? So that tells me there's going to be a long period of time before all the people in the world even know that there's a Christ and that there's salvation through him and evangelism, right? So that hasn't taken, or this part wasn't for them. This is a long time in coming, but they didn't know how long ago it would be. But we're getting close, right? Now we know that. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Now, why would people hate us? What have we done to anyone? I don't believe I've ever seen so much hatred towards one leader in our country, Donald Trump, as I had during his tenure. It was obvious. It was constant. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, I'm not trying to say anything about politics. I'm just saying, not just the media, but I mean the world did not care for Donald Trump. He's a conservative, and they didn't like some of the things he stood for. Of all the political groups, Christians, on the general, stand with conservative people, conservative politically. We are conservative morally. Conservative is our viewpoint of holiness is conservative. And so we tend to linger with a certain political party, generally. And so if they hate him, who's conservative, and the church should be even more conservative than any politician, they're going to hate us even more. You understand where that goes? And so they're going to hand some over, they're going to be persecuted. There's Christians who go to prison. We know Christians are being put to death in certain places of the world. It's happened for a long time. It's happened during the time of the book of Acts. We know that. It happened for the first couple hundred years. The Spanish Inquisition, thousands of Christians were killed. And now it seems like more martyrs now, they tell me, I don't know how they know, but that there's more people who die for Christ today, these last 100 years, than in the first 1900 years. I don't know how they get that statistic. That's what I heard. At that time, many are going to turn away from the faith. Denominations have been splitting in the last several decades over what they consider to be truth and holiness. What does the gospel say? Well, it's what we say it says. What is the family unit again? Going back to that, there's a lot of different aspects. There's homosexuality and different things about marriage and who to ordain and abortion. There's so many different viewpoints on things, and if you have a different viewpoint than what certain people think you should have, they hate you. It's not like you have a little disagreement, we can just agree to disagree. You see in the press how actors and sports and athletes, they are vehement against conservative, valued people. Churches are split. I know the Lutheran Church is split. I know the Mennonite Church is splitting. I know the Methodist Church is just split over certain issues. It's constantly splitting. There are false prophets and teachers and pastors and leaders in these denominations. And so what is truth? One day you go to that church and now they're saying, well, we're split because this side believes this and this side believes that. Which side is God going to take? Right? The increase of wickedness, because of the increase of wickedness, of the turning away of faith, the love of most of you is going to grow cold. And the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. How can you stand firm to the end? What one characteristic does every Christian have that is different than anything that the world has to offer is the love you have for one another. Jesus said the world will know you by my love. That's a very peculiar, very specific kind of love. That's standing firm to the end. Verse 14. Another great clue for us about the times we're living and when Jesus is coming back. He says that this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So obviously, again, only Jerusalem really knew about Jesus and the surrounding areas, right? But he's talking about the whole world. It's impossible to have that happen in just a couple of weeks or even a few years. The last thing I read is that every country in the world has been witnessed to. This prophecy really is pretty much fulfilled. Every nation knows about Jesus Christ. Every country has a Bible in their language. However, that's only 95% of the 7 billion people. There's still 5% of different people of tongues or different nationalities within the nationality, subgroups that do not have the gospel. And places like Wycliffe are constantly trying to get translators to translate the Bible into every language. So, for example, Canada would have been preached to and evangelized, but there's certain native groups that have their own language and Eskimo groups that have their own language that they need to translate the Bible to. But the nation has. Yeah? So Jesus says the gospel has to be preached in the whole world. That's 95% done. How long will it take to get the rest done? Then he says in verse 15, when you see standing in the holy place. Where is the holy place? I'm guessing he's saying Jerusalem, and I'm guessing he's saying where the temple is. But that's not necessary, but that's probably a guess. When you see standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel. And then in the book of Matthew, there's a parenthesis that says, let the reader understand. If you want more understanding about the abomination that causes desolation, you got to go to Daniel, look at the vision he had, and the angel that came and spoke to him. It gives you a little bit more. It's still very vague. It's difficult. Prophecy is difficult to understand because we don't have a for sure. We don't have a time when it's going to happen to be for sure. And so Jesus is giving us certain events. Right now, on the holy place, there is no temple. The Jews have no temple there. It's a place that is argued by Christians, Muslims, and Jews. They all claim that that holy place really belongs to them. And when we see an abomination, and maybe it's there already, maybe the Muslims being there, maybe that's an abomination. I don't know what it is, but there seems to, and it might be a person who does something from there, we don't know. But Jesus says that's another indicator when you see that. Verse 21. Then there's going to be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. The last time the world went through great distress was at the flood. And in 40 days, God destroyed the world with water. And he claimed that he would never do it again. And so after a year, when the water recessed, and Noah and his family could leave the ark, and they built, communities and populated the world, there has not ever been a worldwide distress like that. And never will be again, Jesus says. I suppose because there's going to be a new heavens and new earth. He says, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days would be shortened. Now, that bothers me a little. Because I've always heard, the church is going to be raptured. We're just all going to heaven, and we're not going to have to experience any of the really bad stuff that happens. Well, it seems like we're going to be in some of those days. That might not be the days of tribulation, but it is in the days of the birth pangs of the end of the world. It does seem like the church, you and I, could very well be part of the rest of what's happening here for at least some period of time. That's Jesus' words. Verse 23. Again, he's warning about false teachers, about people who are going to rise up and try to persuade you to follow them. He says at any time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false prophets, or false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. I have told you ahead of time. Now it's very difficult being a Pentecostal preacher who does believe that some people have the gift of healing and the word of knowledge and prophetic and all that stuff. And when someone comes on the scene, that is sort of hard to, think, are these guys of God or not? Are these false prophets? Are they trying to lead us away? I don't know where Jim Hoagie is, but in the Osnabrück church, he could tell you, testify, that one time I just had a word from God that somebody was to be healed in their shoulder, and Jim's like, that's me. And he came up, and I remember praying for Jim, and he's like, I haven't been able to lift my shoulder, and I don't remember how many weeks, whatever it was. You can ask about it in the service. But I wasn't trying to say I was the Messiah. I just, at that time, God spoke to me, and I just, in faith, I just did. But I do not, I do not have the gift of healing at all. But sometimes God moves for any of us. Any one of us could have a word from the Lord for somebody, or maybe healing, okay? We do know that I told the board members ahead of time that I feel like we should move the church, and I feel like this was the place to move it, and that God is going to build the building, and that we should pay for it all out of pocket, not take out a loan. And here we are. So I wasn't trying to be a Messiah, but we can still move in the Holy Spirit. God still speaks to his people. Okay, but these guys are different. They're going to want to do something. Hey, if I was sick and I was lame, I had cancer, I had tumors, I had epilepsy, or a bad heart or something, and I heard that so-and-so had the gift of healing, I would probably want to go to one of his services and have him lay hands on me. But church, you have to have discernment and wisdom from God. What is he speaking? What is he preaching? Is he of God, or is he not? Is he trying to actually lead you away? Because Jesus said, maybe even the elect are going to be fooled. Not enough wisdom to care. You got yourself healed, so I'm just going to follow this man. That's not good. Jesus said, I've told you ahead of time. 29. Immediately after the distress of those days. So now we got all of the things that we've talked about so far, and many more false prophets, and some are going to be very powerful apparently in the things that they do. Immediately, so that tells me it's not going to be thousands of years, but fairly soon. After the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Now that's something we can all observe. If that happened in that day, that means something wonderful for the church is about to happen. Something very terrible, the judgment of God and tribulation, is about to hit the rest of the world and the rest of the population. Jesus says, then, because right after that happens and the moon doesn't give its light, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Then all of the people of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. That to me is what he's saying is the rapture of the church. We're not going to have any more tribulation. There will not be another day where you'll experience sorrow or conflict or anxiety. How you doing? Verse 32. Jesus gives us a couple of object lessons to give us an understanding of what our part in all of this is. The fig tree. He says, about that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but, verse 32, I was reading 36. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all of these things, you know it is near. It is right at the door. I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Now let me explain this generation to you. There are epic periods of time in the Bible. There's the period of time before creation. Something happened in the heavens. Satan wanted some position that didn't belong to him, and there was a battle in heaven, and a third of the angels of Lucifer was cast out of heaven. So there's that generation, if you will. Then God created the earth, man, and all what we live in today. And so there's a period of time from creation of this world until the fall of man. No one knows how long Adam and Eve roamed this earth in harmony with God and perfect relationship with God. 10 years, 1,000 years. There's no time. We have no idea. They didn't age. They're immortal, right? Not quite immortal. And then there's another generation when sin came. Genesis chapter 3, sin came into the world. And from that time on until the time of Noah, it took that amount of time for sin to go all around the world. There was not one person who was righteous in God's eyes except Noah. And so Noah and his family, 8 members in all, were saved from that. And now there's another generation from Noah to Abraham. And when Abraham comes on board, God takes Abraham, and that's the line he's going to have for the salvation of man. It took roughly 2,000 years for that generation to grow to the point where God sends his son. And in that 2,000 years, that generation of Hebrews was God's chosen people. We learn that they have the law, they have the sacrificial system, blood is atonement for sin. They have a temple, they have an altar, all of these things, a priest and a high priest, okay? All of these things foreshadowing the next generation when Jesus Christ comes to the scene. That is this generation Jesus is talking about. All of this is going to happen during this generation. So 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus, and it's been 2,000 years from Jesus till today. Maybe it's just a coincidence, huh? But this generation will not pass away until these things take place. About the day and hour, Jesus says, no one knows, not the angels in heaven, not even me, not even the Son of Man knows the day and the hour, but only my Father in heaven knows. The day He's going to send Jesus. God the Father's on the throne and Jesus is at His right hand. And at some point, when all the things happening in the world and we're going through what we're going through, at one point God is finally going to say, now, son, go. Take your bride and go. Get him out of there. Now, this tribulation's about to hit. The trumpets are about to blow. Jesus says, keep watch. You do not know what day your Lord's going to come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night that the thief was coming, he would have kept watch. He would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect Him. Be ready. So, I want to give you another example. There was a period of time when I was single. Now there's a period of time when I was married. There's a period of time before we had our first child. And when Linda was pregnant, that's like a new generation. I didn't know the day or the hour, but I knew probably around a 9-month period of time, we're going to have a baby. And so the first several months, it's sort of like wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and famines. I mean, not in my house. I mean, you know what I mean? As far as periods of time go. I know that there's a definite period of time, and in God's in heaven there's a definite period of time. And so He's just explaining this is what's going to happen during this pregnancy of the world, if you will. All of a sudden 7-8 months go by, and my wife looked different, and she felt different, and she walked different. And her personality was a little different. She was, 8 months pregnant and going on, right? And the women who've been pregnant, you know that there's these changes. More obvious to you than to me, but you'll let me know. They usually did, somehow. They got it. Anyway, that's the world today. Where are we at? It seems to me like we're in the 8th month and the 3rd week. And the baby can come any moment. I don't expect the child to come in 7 months, even 8 months. They usually have the full 9 months before they're born, but they can come a little bit earlier, a little bit late. And then when it gets closer and closer, other things happen. She dilates. They get these Braxton Hicks, and that's even closer. And then within another week or two, you know it's going to happen. But you just don't know the day. And even if you knew the day, within maybe 24 hours to 48, you're pretty close. I have no idea what hour. I got one that was born at 6:35 and one after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, one 2 o'clock in the morning. Thank you very little. And I didn't know the hour. Not even for sure what day, but I knew it was coming. And we were ready. I didn't wait to make a nursery or buy diapers or to get a car seat and a stroller. We knew we needed all those things. We prepared for the child. Jesus is saying, church, are you prepared for the day I'm about to come back? Are you? Then He gives us Matthew chapter 25, the 10 virgins, the last parable for today. Jesus is at that time, the end times. It's the same sermon throughout. He just continues his teaching on the Mount of Olives, okay? This isn't a new place. He says the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. 5 discerned the time. They went from being single to now waiting to get married and soon going to be married. They just didn't know the day or hour, but they knew the time they were in. The foolish ones took their lamps but didn't take any oil. The wise discerning ones, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here comes the bridegroom, come out to meet him. The bridegroom cometh." When he strolls into town, he starts walking and his best friends are with him, and he might not come right from where he is, where the house is that he's got prepared for his wife, and in this case he's got 10 of them, possible, that he's going to come to get them and bring them back. He would kind of go, take his time, go around the blocks, and it's a big parade, it's a very joyous time, and everybody kind of comes out and meets the bridegroom and kind of tags along if you know him, and they're all getting this great party together, and they're going right to where this house is, where his wives-to-be are waiting for him. At midnight he comes, and all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for us, for both of us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready, who had prepared themselves, who were discerning the times, they went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others came also. "Lord, Lord, here we are," right? Now we got the oil, now I got what I need, but the door's shut. "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. I don't know you. You're not welcome. You had your chance. You have X amount of days in this life to prepare yourself for when he calls us." And they didn't do that. Therefore, Jesus says, "Keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." I don't know you. That's the man who had the talents and decided to hide it in the ground instead of taking it and using it for the kingdom of God and for his master's glory. That was the man who was invited to the wedding feast, but he came in his old clothes. Didn't think to put on wedding clothes like the rest of them. And he was ushered out where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. That is the goats and the sheep who understood the times, who discerned what they needed to do when they saw someone poor, an orphan, a widow, somebody in need, somebody in the hospital, somebody in prison, and they went and met them. Jesus said, as often as he did it for me. Come on in. But the goats said, well, we didn't see anything. We didn't discern that was our responsibility. You were not prepared. You cannot enter. I don't know those people. I'm telling you, there are those who are unprepared for the day Jesus Christ will call us. All of those women, they're all virgins, they're all waiting to get married, they all had lamps, they all waited in the same place, they all seemed like likely candidates to go with the bridegroom, but only half of them had the wisdom to take the oil. What is that? What distinguishes them? That is not just being hearers of the gospel, that is being doers of the gospel. That is acting out what Jesus claimed. That is loving one another with the intense love that God has first shown us. That is preparing yourself for end times. You do not live in fear, you live in victory during these days. Amen.